Hi, this is Chris Walker. I almost ignored this completely, and honestly, that would have been a massive mistake. For the last 5 years, we've all been sold this one specific idea. If you want a premium TV, you buy an OLED. You just do. So you go out, you spend $1,500 on an LG C-Series, you put it in your living room, and actually, wait, let me just show you what really happens. You see that? That's what infinite contrast actually looks like in a real house with windows. It's completely useless. I've been putting the new batch of mid-tier mini LEDs through the ringer, specifically the Hisense U8 and the TCL QM8, and I realized something that genuinely frustrated me. You are probably about to waste $800 for absolutely no reason. Before we tear into these panels and look at the actual backlight grids and off-axis color shifts, if you appreciate testing that doesn't just regurgitate a brand's spec sheet, hit subscribe. It's the only way I can keep buying these units at retail, so I don't owe these companies any favors. Alright, let's talk about the mid-tier bloodbath. Here is the fundamental lie of the premium TV market right now. Every major reviewer, every tech outlet, they all test these panels in a dark room. They turn off the lights, they run a 4K Blu-ray of Interstellar, and they tell you the LG C-Class has the most perfect inky blacks ever engineered by mankind. And mathematically, they aren't wrong. OLED technology is objectively brilliant in a controlled environment. But how many of you actually live in a light-controlled bunker? I didn't think this would matter as much as it does, but when you step back and look at how people actually consume content, it changes the entire math of buying a TV. You get off work, you throw on YouTube, you watch some sports on a weekend afternoon, maybe you leave the news running in the background while you cook. You have windows, you have overhead lighting. When you put a $1,500 OLED in that environment, those perfect infinite blacks don't look black, they look gray. They look like a reflection of your kitchen cabinets. OLEDs have an organic limitation. They aggressively auto-dim to protect themselves from overheating and burn-in. So right when you need the TV to punch through the afternoon glare, the processor panics and actually dims the screen. It is infuriating. You basically paid a massive premium to sit on your couch and squint. That is exactly the vulnerability that Hisense and TCL just exploited to absolute perfection. Let's look at the Hisense U8 first. Now, I've been running this panel as my daily driver in the main living room for the last 3 weeks, and honestly, I expected to find compromises. When a company promises you over 2,000 nits of peak brightness and thousands of local dimming zones for roughly half the price of an LG C4, you assume they cut corners somewhere. And they did, but not where you think. Let me explain that better. When you unbox the U8, it doesn't feel like a piece of high-end luxury furniture. The LG C-Series is impossibly thin. It looks like a pane of glass. The Hisense is thick, it's chunky, it's got some real weight to it because it physically needs space for the massive LED backlight array and the heat sinks required to cool it. When this thing is pushing peak HDR highlights, if you put your hand near the top vents on the back of the chassis, you can literally feel the heat radiating off it. It's working hard. But once you turn it on and actually watch something, none of that chassis thickness matters. The sheer brute force visual impact of this TV is staggering. I booted up some heavily graded HDR content, stuff with bright explosions, neon lights, and bright snowy landscapes. In a room with the blinds completely open, the U8 doesn't just survive the glare, it completely obliterates it. The anti-reflective coating they're using this year isn't perfect. It diffuses direct light into a bit of a rainbow smear if a lamp is pointed right at it, but the panel gets so intensely bright that your eyes simply cannot focus on the reflections. And that brings us to the local dimming. The old argument against LED TVs was blooming. You know, when you have white text on a black background and there's that ugly glowing halo around the letters. Well, the U8 has crammed so many microscopic dimming zones into the panel that the blooming is practically imperceptible from a normal seating distance. Unless you are standing 2 feet away actively hunting for flaws on a loading screen, you aren't going to see it. But here's the reality check. Here is what the spec sheet isn't going to tell you and what I noticed within the first 48 hours. First, the processing. If you feed this TV a pristine 4K stream from Apple TV Plus or a high bitrate Blu-ray, it looks spectacular. But if you're watching a compressed 720p broadcast of a basketball game on regular cable or an older YouTube video, the Hisense processor struggles. It just doesn't have the AI refinement of Sony or LG to clean up a messy, low-quality signal. It can look a little blocky in the shadows. Second, and this is the big one, the viewing angles. This is a VA panel. That means it prioritizes deep contrast over wide viewing angles. If you are sitting dead center on the couch, you get a 10 out of 10 image. But if you have a wide modular sectional and you're sitting off to the side at a 40-degree angle, the colors wash out. The blacks start to lift and look gray. The saturation drops. If you have a wide seating arrangement where people are spread out across the room, this is a massive compromise compared to an OLED, which looks perfect from virtually any angle. And then there's the panel lottery. I hate talking about this because it feels like a gamble, but it's a reality of buying mid-tier brands. Dirty screen effect, or DSE. When the camera pans across a solid color like a soccer field or a hockey rink, you might notice faint vertical shadowy bands behind the image. My review unit is actually pretty clean, maybe an 8 out of 10 on uniformity, but I've spent hours crawling through user forums and there is definitely a consistency issue at the factories. You might get a flawless panel, or you might get one that looks a bit blotchy during sports, forcing you to box it back up and exchange it. That is the hidden tax of saving $800. Before we move on to the CTL, I actually want to pause here. I buy all these units myself so I can rip them apart without a PR rep breathing down my neck. What specific TV or audio gear are you guys actually agonizing over right now? Drop the exact model numbers in the comments below. I pull my next review subjects straight from what you guys are asking for, so let me know what's giving you buyer's remorse or what you're on the fence about. Now, if the Hisense U8 is the overachiever that occasionally trips over its own shoelaces in the software department, the TCL QM8 is something else entirely. Actually, wait, something else isn't the right way to phrase it. It's more like a blunt instrument. If you thought the Hisense was bright, the TCL QM8 is legitimately weapons grade. We are talking about pushing past 5,000 nits of peak brightness in certain HDR windows. When I first tested a sun glare scene in a movie, I literally had to squint. It is physically bright enough to cause eye fatigue if you watch it in a pitch black room. But again, that's not what this TV is for. This TV was built to be placed in a room completely surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows in the middle of July. I set the QM8 right next to the LG C4. Same room, same lighting. I ran a split HDMI matrix to feed them the exact same signal. It was almost embarrassing. The LG OLED was fighting for its life, auto-dimming the picture to prevent panel wear, while the TCL just punched right through the ambient light like a bulldozer. But brute force comes with a cost, and this is where you really need to pay attention before pulling out your credit card. I started noticing this strange behavior in dark, moody scenes, like in The Batman or House of the Dragon. TCL knows that reviewers are obsessed with deep black levels. To achieve that on an LED TV, their local dimming algorithm is incredibly aggressive. It shuts off the backlight zones so hard in dark areas that it actually crushes shadow detail. Yes, the black bars at the top and bottom of the movie look perfectly pitch black, but you also lose the subtle textures in a dark suit or the details in the shadows of a poorly lit room. The TV is essentially overcompensating. It's trying so hard to mimic an OLED's perfect blacks that it actually degrades the image accuracy to get there. And then there's the software handshake issues. Look, I don't expect a $1,000 TV to have a perfect operating system. Google TV runs fairly well on the QM8, maybe a little snappier than the Hisense. But the eARC connection, the port that sends audio to your soundbar or receiver, is notoriously finicky. I hooked this up to a standard Samsung soundbar, and twice in the first week, I turned the TV on and got absolute silence. No audio. I had to go into the settings, toggle the audio output off and back on, and then it suddenly recognized the soundbar. Is it a deal breaker? No, it takes 5 seconds to fix. But if you are setting this TV up for an elderly parent or a spouse who just wants the damn thing to work when they hit the power button, those little micro frustrations add up over a 5-year lifespan. This is the reality of the mid-tier bloodbath. You are trading perfection in the shadows for absolute dominance in bright rooms. You are trading a flawless, ultra-thin aesthetic for a chunky chassis that puts all its money into the backlight engine. If you're coming from a 5-year-old edge-lit LED TV that you bought at a warehouse club, either of these mini LEDs is going to look like alien technology. Your jaw will hit the floor. But the question isn't just whether they're good. The question is whether they actually make the $1,500 LG OLED obsolete for the average buyer. To answer that, we have to look at what happens to these organic OLED panels when you actually live with them day in and day out. What happens when you pause a video game for an hour or leave a news channel ticker running at the bottom of the screen? Because if that TCL feels like a muscle car with a few quirks, the OLED ownership experience is starting to feel like babysitting a Fabergé egg. Let's talk about the exact moment OLED ownership becomes a nightmare. I want you to think about how you actually live in your house. The doorbell rings, your kid needs help with homework, you get stuck on a phone call, you pause the game or you leave a YouTube video sitting on the menu screen and you just walk away. With the TCL QM8 or the Hisense U8, nothing happens. The TV sits there, blasting its backlight, completely unbothered. It's an inorganic LED. You could leave that map screen on for a week and the panel wouldn't care. But with an OLED, the TV is actively having a panic attack. OLED stands for Organic Light Emitting Diode. That word, organic, is the entire problem. It means the materials inside the screen decay over time. They age. And heat is the absolute enemy of that organic material. When you leave a static image on the screen, those specific pixels are burning hot, wearing out faster than the pixels around them. That is what burn-in actually is. It's not an image magically searing itself onto the glass like a brand. It is uneven panel wear. The pixels where the ESPN ticker sits or where your health bar is in a video game literally die faster than the rest of the screen. So, to stop you from destroying the TV you just paid $1,500 for, LG builds in an auto brightness limiter, the ABL, and it is the single most frustrating quirk of owning a premium OLED. You'll be watching a hockey game or a movie with a long, bright outdoor scene, and the TV will just decide it's too bright for too long. It forcibly dims the entire picture to save itself. You are sitting there perfectly engaged in the movie and suddenly the screen drops 30% of its punch. It absolutely ruins the immersion. I noticed something strange here when I was testing the latest LG firmware. They claim they've relaxed the ABL algorithm, but in a moderately lit room, my eyes caught that dimming shift 3 times in a 2-hour movie. And look, I get it. The manufacturers have to do this, but they also sell you this placebo feature to make you feel better about the longevity. They call it a pixel refresher. You'll see this in the marketing materials. Don't worry about burn-in. Our AI pixel refresher runs automatically. Wait, let me explain what that actually does, because it's brilliant marketing but a terrifying reality. The pixel refresher does not magically heal the dead, burnt-out pixels. It cannot reverse organic decay. What it actually does is measure the voltage of the worn-out pixels, and then it artificially accelerates the aging of the healthy pixels around them so that the whole screen matches. Let that sink in. To hide the burn-in, the TV burns down the rest of your panel to make it look uniform. It's like getting a stain on your carpet, and instead of cleaning the stain, you just throw dirt on the rest of the room so it all blends in. That is the hidden reality of OLED ownership. You are babysitting a degrading asset. And this brings me to a trap I see buyers fall into constantly. You look at the LG C-Series, you see the $1,500 price tag, and you think, okay, that's too rich. But look, there's the LG B-Series right next to it for $1,200. It's still an OLED, I'm getting the same tech for cheaper. I almost didn't include the B-Series in this breakdown, and that would have been a mistake, because it is exactly what you should not buy. When you step down to an entry-level OLED like the LG B4 or B5, you aren't just losing a couple of HDMI 2.1 ports, you are losing the premium brightness booster technology inside the panel.
The B-Series is shockingly dim. If you put an LG B-Series in a room with a single open window, it is a $1,200 mirror. It has a weaker processor, which means lower quality cable signals look noisier, and its ability to fight ambient light is virtually zero. You are paying the OLED tax without getting the premium OLED performance. If you only have $1,200 to spend, buying a budget OLED is the worst financial decision you can make in the TV market today. If your budget stops at $1,000 or $1,200, you buy the TCL QM8 or the Hisense U8. Period. They will demolish an entry-level OLED in 90% of real-world viewing conditions. But I want to go deeper into the day-to-day usability because specs on a sheet don't tell you how annoying a TV is to actually use. Let's talk about firmware, operating systems, and the remote control in your hand. LG uses WebOS. Years ago, WebOS was the absolute gold standard. You had this magic remote that worked like a Nintendo Wii controller. You pointed at the screen, a little pink cursor appears, and you just click what you want. Physically, the remote is still great. It feels premium in the hand. The build quality doesn't creak when you squeeze it. But turn the TV on. Actually, don't even press a button. Just look at the home screen. LG has realized that selling you a $1,500 piece of hardware is a one-time transaction. Selling your eyeballs to advertisers is a reoccurring revenue stream. Half of the WebOS interface is now a billboard. You are paying a premium price for a flagship television, and it is serving you ads for mayonnaise and car insurance before you even open Netflix. It feels cheap. It feels cynical.
Contrast that with the mini LEDs. Hisense and TCL both use Google TV. Aesthetically, it's cleaner. It integrates incredibly well if you have an Android phone or use Google Home. But you feel the budget in the silicone. The processors running the OS on the U8 and QM8 just aren't as robust as the chip inside the LG C-Series. Sometimes you press the home button and it takes a full second and a half for the menu to overlay. It stutters. And then there's the eARC nightmare I mentioned earlier. I want to expand on that because this is where buyers end up returning the TV. You buy a massive 75-inch TCL QM8. You get it wall-mounted, you run a high-speed HDMI cable from the eARC port down to your $1,000 soundbar. You want Dolby Atmos. For 3 days, it works flawlessly. Then, on a Tuesday night, you turn the TV on to watch a movie, and there is no sound. The TV thinks the soundbar is there, the soundbar thinks the TV is there, but they refuse to talk to each other. This is a well-documented handshake issue with the firmware on these budget mini LED processors. The fix? You have to reboot the TV from the settings menu. It takes maybe 40 seconds, but imagine explaining that to your spouse. Imagine your kids trying to watch cartoons and yelling that the TV is broken. These are the micro frictions you inherit when you buy raw brute force specs on a budget. The LG C-Series, it handshakes flawlessly every single time. So we have a massive contradiction here. On one side, you have the LG C-Series. It has perfect contrast, perfect off-axis viewing angles, and a rock-solid bug-free audio handshake. But it forces you to babysit it. It dims when you don't want it to, it forces you to worry about static logos, and if the sun is out, it acts like a mirror. On the other side, you have the TCL QM8 and Hisense U8. They are fearless. They output terrifying amounts of brightness, they completely ignore the sun, and you can abuse them for a decade without worrying about burn-in. But you have to deal with minor blooming, occasional software stutters, and narrow viewing angles. I want you guys to weigh in on this right now because this is the exact debate tearing up AV forums. What is the worst trade-off to live with? Are you willing to accept a little bit of haloing and blooming on a mini LED to never worry about burn-in again? Or is perfect pixel-level black worth the anxiety of babysitting an organic panel? Go to the comments and tell me which poison you'd rather swallow, because neither tech is perfect. I've made my choice for my own living room, and it honestly surprised me. We need to group these panels by who they are actually built for, because the idea of a best TV is a complete myth. There is only the best TV for your specific room. Let's start with the purists, the basement dwellers, the late-night gamers. If your primary TV viewing happens after the sun goes down, or if you have blackout curtains and you treat your living room like a dedicated home theater, the LG C-Series is still the king. It just is. When you remove the ambient light problem, the OLED flexes muscles that the mini LEDs simply do not have. I was running some 120Hz gaming tests on a PlayStation 5 last night, playing a really dark, moody game, Alan Wake 2, and this is where the LG completely justifies its price tag. Because OLED pixels are self-lit, their response time is virtually instantaneous. We're talking less than a millisecond. When you pan the camera quickly, there is zero blur, zero ghosting. The image remains perfectly razor-sharp in motion. If you try that exact same fast camera pan on the Hisense U8, because it's a VA-type LED panel, the pixels physically take longer to transition from dark gray to black. It leaves this microscopic, faint trail behind fast-moving objects in dark scenes. Most people won't notice it, but competitive gamers will feel it immediately. But I originally thought the Hisense U8 was the definitive winner for value. And wait, I need to revise that. I was wrong about the long-term math. I was looking at the Hisense U8 as a budget miracle, but when you factor in the sheer volume of firmware updates required to keep it stable and the slight inconsistency in panel uniformity, that dirty screen effect I mentioned, it's actually a slightly riskier buy than the TCL. If you want the absolute best value in the entire television market right now, the crown goes to the TCL QM8. Let me explain exactly why this specific panel breaks the entire pricing structure of the TV industry. You are getting over 5,000 nits of peak brightness and thousands of local dimming zones for right around $1,000. If you put this TV in a normal American living room with a sliding glass door, a couple of windows, maybe some overhead recessed lighting, it is going to deliver a more impactful, punchy, and enjoyable image than the $1,500 LG OLED. You don't have to babysit it. You don't have to worry if your kids leave the Apple TV menu sitting on the screen for 3 hours while they go eat lunch. You don't have to close the blinds on a Sunday afternoon to watch a football game. It is a tank. Yes, the black levels will occasionally crush some shadow detail, and yes, if you sit way off to the side in a recliner, the colors will shift a little bit, but for 95% of normal daily viewing, it is a terrifyingly good television that exposes the OLED tax for what it really is. And that brings us to the truth bomb that the major tech outlets are terrified to actually say out loud. The industry wants you to buy OLED. They desperately want you to stay on that premium tier. Why? Because the margins are incredibly high, and more importantly, OLEDs have an expiration date. It is an organic technology. Every single hour you watch an LG C-Series, the panel is permanently degrading. Very slowly, yes, but it is decaying. If you buy an OLED, the manufacturer knows with mathematical certainty that you will be back in the market for a new television in 5 to 7 years because your panel will have lost 30% of its peak brightness, or you'll have a faint ghost of a CNN logo burned into the bottom corner. It is a built-in hardware subscription model disguised as a luxury product. When you buy a premium mini LED like the TCL QM8, you are stepping off that treadmill. You're buying an inorganic grid of microscopic flashlights that will burn just as brightly in year 8 as they do on day 1. You are trading the absolute flawless perfection of a pitch black shadow for the peace of mind of a television that you never have to think about again. I didn't expect to end up here when I started this testing cycle. I've had an OLED in my main living room for 4 years, but after living with these high-end mini LEDs, trying to go back to watching an OLED in a sunlit room feels like a massive downgrade. I'm tired of squinting. I'm tired of seeing my own reflection during a dark movie scene. If you are building a dedicated dark home theater, go buy the LG C-Series. It is a masterpiece of engineering. But for the rest of us, for the people with windows and kids and chaotic living rooms, the era of defaulting to OLED is over. The TCL QM8 and the Hisense U8 have officially made spending $1,500 on a mid-tier OLED a massive financial mistake for the average buyer.
Now, a quick warning before you go hunting for these. Retailers are notorious for mixing up the model numbers, especially on Amazon and Best Buy. They will try to quietly sell you last year's QM8 or last year's U8 at a discount, but those older revisions have older processors that struggle heavily with motion blur and blooming. The part numbers get incredibly confusing, and you do not want to get stuck with last year's silicone just to save $50. I've put together a list of vetted sources down in the description. These are specific, verified links to the exact hardware revisions and current year panels I tested in this video. If you are going to buy one of these, use those links so you know you are getting the safe version with the updated firmware and not a dusty warehouse leftover. It also helps fund this channel so I can keep buying these TVs out of pocket and telling you exactly where they fail. Think about your room. Look at your windows. Stop buying TVs based on what they look like in a pitch black studio. I'm Chris Walker. I'll see you in the next one.